Hello everyone, welcome back. This is my third tier list video, and this time I'm going to be ranking the martial arts. Now, a little bit of background about me. I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 2 years, and I live in New York, so I've had a lot of people come into the gym who do various other martial arts, usually some sort of grappling, and let's just say I've gone against a whole lot of people. Well, that's basically my perspective on it. So let's just get started. I'll rank Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu later. You know what? I'll just do it right now. I'm just gonna put it in the S tier. Um, Fairly obvious reasons, just because it really changed the game. You guys can obviously look back to the early '90s with the beginning of the UFC, how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu beat all the other martial arts. For this ranking system, we're just going to consider two people dressed normally, fighting in like a normal type room, let's say with a decently hard floor, four walls, but enough space to fight. I feel like that's the fairest way. You can't really expect everything to be in a cage. I still have to put Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really high, just because one thing that I find is even with 2 years experience, when I can turn it into a grappling match, there's really not much non-Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people can do. Wrestlers, to a certain extent, can be okay, but they usually have maybe like 4, 5, 8 years of wrestling experience. And then sometimes they still get caught and stuff. And usually they don't really know how to finish a submission, or they just kind of know the Kimura, which is a shoulder lock. That's one thing that I find. Although, if this is just a straight up fight to the death, wrestlers would probably throw strikes while they do get those advantages on the takedown. But I'll get to wrestling when I get to it. I'm just going to put Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu up there at the S class for now. I might move it around later. We'll see. So karate, karate was kind of considered a joke of a martial art for a while. But honestly, it's not bad. You know what, in fact, I'll leave it at B tier for now. But it's not a bad martial art. I mean, there are a lot of McDojos, which is, people who aren't real karate experts, or it's just the skill has been diluted so much that the stuff that actually works doesn't really get taught. But there are exceptions, because there are a lot of real karate schools and a lot of karate implementation in the higher levels of MMA. So the karate stance is like a pretty wide stance, and it doesn't work for everyone, but it does help with getting in and out. You get in, throw a few punches, jump back out, keeping the hands down. It's almost counterintuitive, because you'd expect to fight well, you'd want to have your hands up, guarding your chin so you don't get knocked out. But karate has been shown to work. Now, it's lower on the list because you do need some sort of augmentation to get karate to really work at higher levels. It's just karate on its own. It doesn't fare well against stuff like, Muay Thai and, kickboxing, that type of stuff. But it is a viable martial art, and it can be a pretty decent base. I mean, if you look at guys like Wonderboy Thompson, like he's gotten into work. I mean, it just takes a bit of modification to work. But it's definitely a martial art where if you're learning the actual decent version of it, like a good karate school, like you don't have to be learning like the ancient karate to be able to, like a lot of martial arts, people argue like, oh, this was used in war. I don't know how much it was used in war. I think people in ancient times used spears and arrows and shield formations more so than any sort of punching and kicking. But I'm getting on a little bit of a tangent. I would say that karate is a solid B tier. I might talk about it a bit more later when comparing other stuff. Now, Aikido, this is another thing that goes back to those ancient martial arts. I'm going to have to put it in D tier, because the basis of Aikido was an offshoot of Jiu-Jitsu, I believe. And they say it was used to deflect swords. So if you were fighting in combat and you were a samurai, and you lost your sword, you could use Aikido to be able to get the time in order to grab your sword, or defend, and you would basically throw people who were coming at you with the intent to kill. Now, in modern day, and even then, it's just a losing battle, okay? You're not going to fight off a guy with a sword with your bare hands unless you just happen to get like very lucky and you're wearing armor. It's a lot to consider there. But even, especially in the modern day, it's just been proven not to work. I mean, there's so many grappling competitions going on all the time. Where are the Aikido guys? Oh, they say that they're either too deadly for it, they don't want to snap someone's hands, break their wrist, or they don't want to accidentally kill someone, or then they say, oh, the martial art, it's not about violence, we just, practice self-defense. Well, I'm sorry, but that's bullshit. Every martial means war, every martial art pertains to violence, and I have never seen any real practical use of Aikido. Now, they do some like wrist locks and finger traps. There might be something to that, but in my experience in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've had people grab my fingers and hands all the time. And the thing is, like, if the adrenaline's pumping, even if you snap a finger or two, I'm not going to go, and let go of you. Like, I'm probably just going to sink the choke in, or I'm going to start elbowing you, or whatever. It's really about, it's much more important to focus on a dominant position. The thing is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can get you to a dominant position, and a lot of these other martial arts can get you to a dominant position where you're controlling the other person. But some martial arts focus on, when I'm in that non-dominant position, I'm going to break a finger or poke the eye. And it's really hard to do that, especially if the person is on top of you and has your arms pinned, and maybe you get a hand free and you jab your thumb in their eye. Okay, but they have the leverage on you, and they can, do something like grab your wrist, and they could do the same to you, only they have leverage over you. So that's just a little bit on Aikido. I really don't think it works. That's why it has to be down at the bottom. I think learning it is kind of a waste of time. I mean, people can get stuff out of it, but if you want to, actually know how to defend yourself to a certain degree, I would definitely say karate is a viable option if you can find a good school, and I would say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a very viable option. Again, in a room where I was fighting, and if I was fighting an Aikido guy, like, with equal experience to me, or even more experience, there's plenty of videos of guys who just know a little bit about takedowns, and they can, just take down an Aikido guy and just, fuck them up, because they don't really spar that much. Maybe some schools do, but if you ever watch videos on it, it's a lot of like bullshit, like, I'll grab your wrist, then you'll have to flip over. And that's really not how real life works. People aren't going to run at you with their hands like pushing into your hips or stuff like that. Well, that sounds like a double leg takedown, but people aren't going to run at you like with their face up, like just expecting to be thrown. You kind of have to make it happen in a grappling situation. Anyway, let's move on to sumo. Sumo is, it's, you guys know what sumo is. It's not a real martial art per se. It's more of a sport. I think it's a really tough sport, and I have some respect for the people who do it. But really, it's just pushing each other, maybe a little bit of, a little bit of like how to take someone down, a little bit of how to like control someone's upper body to move them and throw them. But I'd say it's not really effective for the most people. And if someone, like, how much technique really goes into sumo, and how much is it just the body type of being like really fat but really explosive? I just don't think it's really viable. If I was fighting a version of myself who took 2 years of sumo, I think I could fuck him up. Greco-Roman wrestling, it looks like it got cut off a little bit here when I cropped it. Greco-Roman is pretty good. I think I'll even put it in A tier. So Greco-Roman wrestling is it's basically wrestling where instead of focusing on taking takedowns through the legs, you focus on upper body takedowns, much like judo. But judo is more about throws, where Greco-Roman is more about takedowns. It's just takedowns using the upper body. If you watch someone fight like Yoel Romero, that is a good example of Greco-Roman wrestling, which is taking the person down to the ground, passing the guard, whatever. You could throw some punches, and then the only thing is that they don't really focus on keeping them on the ground. So that's the difference between Greco-Roman and freestyle wrestling. Freestyle wrestling, I'll put a little bit higher. I think it might be pretty interchangeable with jiu-jitsu. I just think if I'm going on this 2-year timeline, I would say 2 years of jiu-jitsu might be more worthwhile than 2 years of wrestling. Because again, I've gone against a lot of wrestlers who come in, and some of them have done very well against me, but I can't think of anyone who's come in and wrestled 2 years in high school and it's made any difference in a submission grappling match. It's training, yeah, and they're not throwing strikes, but I don't know. I feel like it's definitely probably the best base for mixed martial arts, but you really have to combine stuff to it. And I don't know if ground pound, I've never had to actually ground pound someone. People have play ground pounded at me in jiu-jitsu. It's not something I really do. But I think just getting to those positions and holding someone and being able to maybe choke them or maybe punch them or control them, I think it's a really big, and I think it puts it a lot above a lot of striking martial arts. Just because if you don't have that self-defense built in to not get taken to the ground, then you're going to get neutralized. Because there's no martial art that really focuses on throwing strikes on the ground, and there's really not much you can do if you don't have any grappling and you're on the ground, or forget even getting on the ground. It's like if someone's just grabbing you, or someone's too close to punch basically and is wrapped around you, there's really not many ways to punch or kick, or maybe you can elbow yourself out, but it goes into clinch fighting, it goes into grappling. And it's just, I think that's why most grappling is better in this situation than striking, although there are a lot of very useful striking martial arts. I'm just gonna say anything B tier and up, if you learn that and you learn that alone, it's pretty good just for basic self-defense. And if you're fighting someone who knows no martial arts, stuff in D tier, you know what, I'll put Aikido even lower than Sumo, because I feel like someone who learns Sumo, they might actually learn some helpful things about balancing, not getting taken down, and just aggression. I feel like Aikido, it might actually make you possibly a worse fighter. But let's just keep going with this list. Submission wrestling, it's basically just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'll put it a little lower because people think it's just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but without a gi. So a gi just simulates, the clothes that an average person is wearing. It makes things a little bit more technical. It helps people, you grab the clothes so that they can't move as well, so you really have to think more about what you're doing. Submission wrestling, you're a bit more slippery. And submission wrestling probably lines up more with mixed martial arts, but if we're considering what the average person is wearing and where they'd be fighting, you'd probably have some clothes on. So someone who has only ever done submission wrestling would probably do very well. They'd probably do better than just a pure wrestler. But they would have some trouble with someone who was specialized in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the gi, and they were both wearing clothes, just because you wouldn't really expect certain chokes, but everything that a submission wrestler could do is something that a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person, a pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person, would have seen. But these are basically interchangeable, if I'm being honest. And, I think I'd still put them above a wrestler at 2 years, just because wrestling's very good. You control where the fight takes place, and that's the most important thing. But if wrestling is all you have, it doesn't matter if neither of us are going to the ground and one of these, because we'll be at equal punching strength, let's say. So all you did was neutralize us to a certain point, but eventually someone's going to grab the other person, and it's the wrestler's instinct to grapple, and it's the grappler's instinct to grapple, basically. So I think it would eventually turn into some sort of grappling match. I put freestyle above Greco-Roman and submission wrestling above Greco-Roman just because of that ground control. And I think that ground control is just very important. You just neutralize all the basic instincts of a human being fighting. Okay. Taekwondo. I'm actually going to put Taekwondo down in C tier. There's really two different schools of Taekwondo. There's the old school, which is focused on power, hard kicks, hard punches. And then there's the new school, which is more based around, like, Olympic type stuff, like, which is touch Taekwondo, tapping the person with your foot, getting a point, punching them in the chest, getting a point. So a lot of the stuff isn't the most effective to be used for striking. It doesn't really prepare you like a lot of these other striking martial arts for an actual fight, but it is much better to know like 2 years of Taekwondo than to know nothing. And unlike Aikido, I think it wouldn't make you worse than the average person at fighting. And Taekwondo is useful in the sense that it really, like, some of the best kickers in MMA learn from Taekwondo people because they have the wildest kicks. It's just the way that their sport has developed, where you get points for creative entries on kicks. And if you bring that over to something like MMA, it does translate to a little bit of an advantage at range. So it is useful. It's just I hesitate for advising someone to make that their base. I would say definitely learn some Taekwondo kicks, but the rest of the stuff you can probably find better elsewhere. Okay. Sanda is it's a Chinese martial art. It's actually, I'm going to put it in the mixed column. It's kind of like MMA, pankration, and while I'm here, I'm going to put Sambo here too. Sanda is it's a Chinese martial art. It's a combination of basically kickboxing and wrestling. Obviously, if you combine two of these martial arts, it is going to be better than just one thing alone, especially if it's something as good as wrestling and, let's say, kickboxing or Muay Thai. It's just, I think it's cheating if you're comparing pure martial arts. Same with Sambo. Sambo is basically it's just Russian MMA at this point. They do have some unique leg locks and stuff that you might not see in you'll see it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission wrestling now, but it's definitely its own unique grappling style to a certain degree. But it's really like if you just combine Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, freestyle wrestling, and I don't know, some boxing. I don't know how many kicks they really throw in Sambo, but they do pick up and throw and slam a lot, which is definitely good to use, especially in a real life fight where the ground is hard. Same with Greco-Roman, they like pick you up and throw you, that type of wrestling. This is more like wrestle you to the ground and control. But yeah, again, these are mixed martial arts. I mean, they're very good. I mean, but it's basically like a 2-for-1. So I'm just gonna leave them in their own column. I guess I'll put Sambo above Sanda because I don't really know too much about Sanda, but there aren't really many champions of Sanda that have gone worldwide. I mean, there was a guy who's Chinese at, I think he's at welterweight or something in the UFC, and he's from a Sanda background, so that's pretty impressive. And then there's Wei Li Zheng, who is of course the new female flyweight champion, who came from Sanda. But at the same time, I mean, I saw her fight, and she threw a bunch of Muay Thai knees and elbows to win the championship, and it really looked like a lot of judo too. So I wonder how much of that is just, I learned MMA, but I'm calling it Sanda. And same thing with Sambo. You have like some of the best champions of all time. Habib Nurmagomedov, probably the most famous currently. He says like, oh, it's all Sambo all the time. And I can agree with that, but to me it just looks like it's MMA, it's really good cage control, it's really good wrestling fundamentals. I really don't know how much of that is Sambo, But I'm just going to put these in the mix. I mean, another one I could put here is pankration. You don't really see many guys who are repping pankration. It's like the Greek MMA, basically. But I saw some competition from the Olympics, and it just looked like jiu-jitsu with some not great stand-up. So it would probably go here. And then MMA would be at the top of here. But that's just mixed stuff. I don't really want to focus on that too much. So next I'm going to talk about Muay Thai. Everyone knows that Muay Thai is probably the best stand-up martial art. I shouldn't say everyone knows, because not everyone is super into martial arts. But yeah, Muay Thai, it comes from Thailand. Instead of just focusing on, punching and kicks, they also focus heavily on knees and elbows, and most importantly, maybe not most importantly, but very importantly, the clinch. The clinch is when you're right up next to a person and you're basically grappling. You have your arm around their neck and an arm, you're controlling them, and you're making space in order to throw more strikes. Whereas someone who's Greco-Roman, they might end up in the same clinch-like position, or even a jiu-jitsu guy like myself end up in that position. But the thing is, this guy's going to try and toss you on your head. And this guy is going to try and take you to the ground and submit you. But this guy right here, the Muay Thai guy, he's going to just be throwing elbows. He's going to try and knock you out. And it's a very, painful looking martial art to watch, to be honest. I've seen some of these guys after the fight, their legs are destroyed. It's really insane to watch. But they harden their shins. They have some of the most damaging stuff. One thing that I would say is a little bit interesting is that I feel like Muay Thai, surprisingly, it doesn't work as well at the higher weight classes. You don't see too many heavyweights who are really repping Muay Thai. It's more of something for smaller guys. I think the thinking behind that is that Muay Thai fighters don't move a lot. There's not a lot of footwork like you'll see in boxing, which I'm just going to take boxing here because now I'm kind of talking about it. I think I might even put boxing above Greco-Roman wrestling. A Greco-Roman wrestling, it's very helpful, but boxing is probably the best possible martial art just to dabble in for a few years and to have if you're going to fight someone, I don't want to say out in the street, but just fight someone in a non-bout, I guess. But anyway, so in Muay Thai, it's better at the lower weights because you get hit a little bit more with that style. You're not moving around. You're not really about ducking. Muay Thai is more about, you take one punch and then you give 3 or 4, or you give the more devastating kick, or you work at some really good combination. And I mean, it's really effective. If a Muay Thai person fought just a boxer, the boxer would probably lose most of the time, except at the heavier weights, the boxers seem to beat the Muay Thai guys. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because if your legs aren't conditioned, like Muay Thai fighters, their legs are conditioned, so they can kick really hard. It's like getting hit by a baseball bat. And if, a lot of times you'll see a Muay Thai guy throw 3 or 4 kicks at a boxer's leg, and they just can't even move anymore, and then the boxer gets knocked out. But the thing is, though, when you mix all these martial arts together to try and be a complete fighter, at the heavier weight classes, boxing is a bit more useful because you're really searching for that knockout and those body shots, and kicks really aren't going to finish anyone. They're helpful, but a kick kind of opens you up a little bit. It's a little bit risky, and it might not always be worth the reward if you're a real heavy hitter. But the reason that I put Western boxing above Muay Thai and Greco-Roman is just because it's the most fundamental, basic kind of instinctual way how to fight, which is throw your fist. And Western boxing has been around for so long, and people have been fighting for money in it for over 100 years, definitely more than that, but it's just developed to a point where it really is a science. And I think that just having that, I mean, if you get grabbed, you're kind of screwed. And if it's funny, if Western boxer, just someone who only knows that, fights any of these people, they'll probably lose. But I think it's just so fundamental. If I was gonna say train 2 years in something, boxing would be a pretty good base. Okay, now we're on to Krav Maga. Krav Maga is something that I guess I'll put it above sumo wrestling, but contrary to what you see in like movies and TV shows about, oh my god, he knows Krav Maga, there's a reason you've never seen a Krav Maga fighter in like fighting for money, and that's because it's based on self-defense. And self-defense, it takes a lot of liberties in how martial arts are done. So imagine like you go to a boxing class. Okay, they'll put boxing gloves on you. They'll show you how to throw punches for a while, and then maybe you'll spar, and then you're dodging punches and you're throwing punches and you're blocking punches, right? Krav Maga and other self-defense martial arts are like, okay, someone's gonna punch you, and hypothetically you're gonna grab their arm, and then you're going to do like a Mick twist and some sort of crazy shit, and then poke their eye, and you're gonna bite their ear off, and then they'll definitely do this. I think it's too hypothetical, and you can't really spar with all this stuff that makes Krav Maga what it is. Groin strikes, eye pokes, and all these things, I mean, we see them work in real life fights, especially at the highest level of fighting, like the UFC champions. They'll poke one another in the eye. It's not supposed to be allowed, but it does help win fights. But it's just building your whole martial art around eye pokes, kicking someone in the nuts, gun disarms. It's just, I don't think it's very practical. Now, some people, they actually learn like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, get to black belt, or they have like a wrestling background, or they boxed, or they did Muay Thai, and then they get like a Krav Maga certificate, and they kind of teach all that eye poke, gun disarm, nut kick stuff, but with a background of adding in some of this good stuff up here. And that's fine. I mean, that's really good. It's just what I find the basics of Krav Maga to be is that the one thing that they always have is those three things, like dirty moves and, knife fighting, which, I mean, how many of these people have really been in knife fights? How many of these people have really, like, disarmed a gun? I mean, versus everyone here has, even Taekwondo people, like, they spar, they compete against each other. It's just, you don't see that in Krav Maga, so I wouldn't really be too worried about fighting someone with 2 years of Krav Maga experience. I mean, they can, like, try and squeeze my balls or whatever, but if I just get to a better position, like, anything that they can do that's, like, quote-unquote a dirty move, I can do too, but I can do it from better control, I would say. Okay, so Judo, I'm going to put surprisingly high. I think I'll even put it, I want it to be at the top of A tier. I'm going to move boxing up. Judo, especially if you're fighting on a place where the floor is not like super bouncy, it works really well. And people are a little bit harsh on Judo because usually it's not the best martial art to use in competition. And Ronda Rousey used it to great effect, and I think Weili Zhang used it pretty well. I think she has some pretty good judo technique, and Valentina Shevchenko too. But you notice something, it's only the women who are able to pull off judo. A lot of guys, when they try and do that, they're fighting other guys, and it's just too much power, and they get knocked out going in for those judo throws. That's at least what I think. Or maybe it's just more guys have that wrestling background or that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. But we don't see much judo in men's competition. However, it's ranked so high because if you're fighting the average person, they're wearing a shirt, jeans, whatever. It's very useful to pick them up and throw them. And Greco-Roman does the same thing, but I think Judo is just a little bit better because it's expecting the person to be wearing clothes. You wear a gi, much like in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The only thing is that their ground game, they do have a ground game, which is more than some of these other grappling things, but their ground game, it's not quite at the level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I would say it's like this. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, probably 90% of the time you're on the ground grappling, and 10% you're standing up learning takedowns and hand fighting and whatever. Judo's the opposite. It's 90% standing up, throwing people, hand fighting, that kind of stuff, and 10% on the ground. So I think when a judo person typically goes up against a Brazilian jiu-jitsu person, if the Brazilian jiu-jitsu person pulls guard or just, doesn't get knocked out from the throw, they have a pretty good chance of escaping whatever submission and submitting the judo guy. But judo's really high because if they grab you and the ground's hard and you're wearing a jacket, like, you're going into the ground really quick and really fast, faster than I'd say Greco-Roman, which is pretty good, but they more pick you up, like they're not wearing a jacket. Judo, it's all throws, and I think it's like a really good martial art to know. The only thing is that I think it has a hard time, at least a little bit. Like, there's a little bit of danger when you're fighting someone that knows, like, Muay Thai or is a good boxer or karate or taekwondo even, because they're not really training to, like, throw strikes and get hit and get punched in the face. But the thing is, if you can just survive that first, like, 20, 30 seconds and just grab a person, they're going into the floor hard. And I think that's just a very valuable martial art to know. Okay, Kung Fu. Kung Fu, I don't think is real. I'm sorry. I've seen it in movies, and it works well in movies. It's not really based on anything. I don't see like Kung Fu. I mean, there's so much Kung Fu, I guess. There's different schools and whatever, and I'm sure there are Kung Fu schools where they're really just teaching, like, MMA fundamentals or fighting fundamentals, but they call it Kung Fu. But that traditional Kung Fu that you see people doing in movies and stuff, it's just, there's no advantage to, like, fighting like a snake or like a flamingo or whatever kind of, or like a crane or something. It's just, I mean, karate kind of does that, but better. Taekwondo kind of does that, but better. Like Kung Fu, it's almost delusion, I think, nowadays, where it's almost as bad as, like, those chi knockouts, I think. I mean, maybe there's some value for it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd like to hear in the comments anyone who does Kung Fu and has at least cross-trained a little bit in other stuff so they could have a good perspective. Let's just move on to... Now, Wing Chun is technically a type of Kung Fu, so I'll give it that. I'm going to put it a little bit higher than this other stuff because I think Wing Chun is odd in that it specializes in close quarters fighting, and by that I mean like fighting in the clinch like Muay Thai, or fighting really close like sometimes boxers do, or fighting within judo throw distance or Greco-Roman. It's not like long punches. They do have some kicks that they do, like a straight leg kick, which isn't bad, but a lot of these other martial arts do that too, and probably do it a little bit better. But Wing Chun is more about, it's built around trapping the opponent's punches and then returning with many more weaker strikes. You don't see haymakers really in Wing Chun. I mean, you probably do when people freak out and just start throwing haymakers. But what I mean is, the perfect Wing Chun fighter is going to get punched at and is going to deflect it or trap it and then return with, like, a back fist or some punch to the face and then keep it going and just chain punch. So that's what you see in, like, the Hitman movies. But the thing is if you're going in and you're expecting, I'm going to let the other person hit me first, I'm going to let the other person initiate, it's the same problem with Aikido. I'm going to let the other person hit me first. It's just not a great strategy. And the thing is, I think there's some value to trapping the hands and hitting above the guard. I think Tony Ferguson does that. But it's also, they do that in Muay Thai too. And I think in Muay Thai, they probably have a little bit more of an advantage because they're also dealing with elbows, knees, kicks, and it's all within clinch range. See, a Wing Chun fighter wants to fight you within clinch range. But what if you just grab them? They only do punches. I don't even think they throw elbows. They don't grapple. So you're really in the ideal range to be grappling or to be throwing elbows or knees. Or yes, punches, but they only focus on punches, and that's their martial art. So there is some value to it, not as much as Taekwondo. for sure. But there's some value to it, but I think it's just so limited. There's only a few things I think that can really be salvaged from Wing Chun. And, people might find that offensive. I'm sure it's like a deep pool of stuff you could learn, but I don't see it. I mean, send me videos if you know it, but I don't know. Tai Chi is definitely not real. Tai Chi is just yoga, really. Chi isn't real. It's not. You're not gonna knock me out with magic, bro. I mean, I like yoga. I've never done Tai Chi before, but it's just not a martial art. I don't know what people are thinking that Tai Chi is a martial art. It may have come from a martial art, but I don't see it. I lost kickboxing. Now, kickboxing is higher than C tier. Kickboxing, I'll put below Muay Thai. It's very useful, and like the best kickboxers in the world can compete with any other striker, I think. It's just, it has a little bit less going for it than Muay Thai, and it has pretty good footwork. It has better footwork than Muay Thai, but it doesn't have that boxing footwork. I think a kickboxer would beat up a boxer, but just for like that standard value of techniques at your disposal, I think a lot of the stuff is going to be covered in Muay Thai. It's kickboxing, you can throw any kind of punch, any kind of kick, really. But they don't really focus on leg kicks because they didn't find them useful until relatively recently. Maybe they do it now in competition. I'm not sure. It probably depends on the competition. But it's just like a more limited way of fighting. But there's a lot more value to it than something like karate or taekwondo. And that's because people fight for money in it. And a lot of the stuff that you see, if people are fighting for money or for like college scholarships or the Olympics to a lesser extent, because sometimes the Olympics turn it into like a point game and the martial art loses some of its effectiveness. But a lot of this stuff, if people are competing, it's going to make the martial art that much better because it really incentivizes people to be good instead of just appearing good. Okay. Lethwei, a lot of people might not know about. It's basically Muay Thai, but you can also strike with your forehead. It's some pretty crazy shit. It's out of Myanmar, or the former Burma. The only reason I put it this low is just because how many practitioners of Lethwei are there in the world? Like 1,000, maybe? And I feel like maybe if you go to Cambodia, like you can find some real practitioners. But there's not enough people working on it to really bring out the best in it. Like, it took Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from like the 90s to now, it's completely different. Like, the fundamentals are still there, but it really evolved. And a lot of this stuff has evolved, especially boxing. Like, it's crazy to think how technical boxing can be nowadays. But Lethwei, it just doesn't have as many people as Muay Thai doing it, for instance. And I think it could be good, but also striking with your head is an interesting concept. Most martial arts don't even consider headbutts, except, ironically, Krav Maga. But I don't know. I think Lethwei is good. It doesn't have as much a talent pool that we can really dive into and learn about it. Like, there's more successful karate fighters than Lethwei fighters, for instance. Capoeira also comes from Brazil, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's just that I'm going to have to put it at the top of D tier because maybe there is some stuff that's useful from it. It has some really cool kicks. But it's just, when you think of the base of the martial art, it comes from dancing. And maybe I don't know. We're not in a cartoon, right? We're not in a anime where the main character learns to dance really well and then becomes a great fighter. Like, we're not doing wax on, wax off. Like, you learn to fight by fighting, by learning technique and then sparring. Like, that's how you best learn. And I don't really know capoeira. They really spar. If they do, it probably helps the martial art a bit. But most of the stuff is unneeded movement, jumping around, throwing weird kicks, and it's cool. It's very cool. It's probably a worthwhile martial art to know, but I think there's very little to take out of capoeira that you can't really get from taekwondo, for instance, that can be useful. I just don't think it's a good base to have. And it probably takes like you have to be really athletic to do it well, at least. So that's not a good sign. Like, people who are very out of shape can be okay at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Luta Livre, I almost feel bad. This is basically just submission wrestling. You know what? Should I even put it up here? I'm just not even going to... Fine, I'll put it up here. I'm going to just put it down here because... Luta Livre, it's basically just submission wrestling mixed with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mixed with freestyle, Greco, whatever. It's just the Brazil's version of it. In the beginning, there was a big rivalry between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Luta Livre. It's probably cooled down now. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is kind of like the rich people in Brazil's martial art because you had to be able to afford a gi. Whereas Luta Livre, basically, which is submission wrestling, it's just less people do it, I guess, was like the poor man's martial art where you didn't need anything. You could just, show up, take your shirt off, and grapple. And they were learning a lot of the same stuff. It's just Luta Livre, free wrestling, had more, freestyle wrestling. It just had more of a wrestling base, I think. That's really the only difference. But there's so many less people who do Luta Livre than these other martial arts. So kind of like how Lethwei is lower. Like on paper, Lethwei, it has all the striking and headbutts. It should be up here. But there's just so few people that do it. That how much can it evolve, really? Oh, catch wrestling. Yeah, I almost forgot about catch wrestling. Catch wrestling is pretty good. I'll put it below boxing. It's another thing where, unfortunately, there's not that many people who do it. But I think there's enough people that do it. It's kind of like a mix of submission wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's basically submission wrestling, just with more of, like, I want to control. Like, a submission wrestler / Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person spends a lot of time fighting off their back, working for weird stuff, tripping up the legs. Catch wrestling doesn't really focus on any of that. Catch wrestling, it just comes from that wrestling perspective. It's just, I'm going to pin you, then I'm going to submit you, or I'm going to get you on the ground and submit you. Something that's interesting, I don't think I've ever gone against someone who was pure catch wrestling. I have grappled with people who did a little bit of catch wrestling and then went to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or at least tried catch wrestling. So it's just a catch wrestler, theoretically, will go for submissions before setting them up as much as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person. If I'm grappling someone, I'm going to want to take their back, ideally, and then sink in a choke. A catch wrestler might, kind of get half the back and then just grab the neck and try and, twist it or try and do some, weird submission. And sometimes that works, especially if you're bigger. I think there's value to catch wrestling. Again, it's not many people do it. The only thing I regret is that I put Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu all the way at the top, and I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, so, I might be a little bit biased putting my own martial art at the top. I mean, I'm just going to go through this really quickly. If I had to fight these people to the death, there would be a 50-50 shot of me dying if I fought a submission wrestler. Freestyle wrestler, I think I'd probably do okay. It's just, they can control where the fight goes, and they might just catch me in an unlucky spot and then punch me. So that's why it's up here. Boxer, that's the thing. Can they knock me out before I can take them down? My takedowns aren't the best, so they're up here. And it just, I think it might just be harder to catch them. They might not be expecting someone to try and grab them, but a boxer can knock you out quick. And people might say, oh, well, they train wearing boxing gloves, and that's kind of not realistic. Your hands aren't going to have pillows around them. True, but I think in a fight, you can break your hands on a person's face and keep going. And I think breaking your hand on someone's face, it'll hurt you, but it'll hurt them too. And if someone's not used to striking, I think there's a lot of value to that, and especially at the heavier weights. Catch wrestling, I would be a little nervous fighting a catch wrestler, but I just think their talent pool is so small that I don't really know how much the martial art is developed. So I think I could beat a 2-year catch wrestling guy. Judo, like I said before, as long as I survive the throw, I could just run in and pull guard. Greco-Roman, they could probably control me, but I think I could get out and control the back. By the way, I'm not comparing myself to actual people. It really depends. Okay, so let me just pause here and say, everyone says it's not the martial art, it's the practitioner. I think that's bullshit to a certain degree. I mean, if I just take you out behind a shed and I teach you how to slap a wall really hard and call it a martial art, like, that's not going to make you better than a boxer, even if you're like a super athlete, okay? What I mean is, like, I'm comparing these martial arts to myself if I was doing them for 2 years. And I have somewhat understanding of everything on this list. Probably Kung Fu the least is what I know about. But I'm comparing this to myself, like, and I think you should too if you're trying to rank martial arts. Compare where you would be if you were fighting someone who did 2 years or 3 years or 10 years of whatever. So anyway, Muay Thai is scary because, they could beat me standing up, and their clinch is good. But again, it's like we have that option to pull guard, right? Kickboxing, it might be hard to get close. That would probably be the thing I'd worry about the most, is they have that footwork. They can keep me back with kicks, teeps, jabs. It would be scary to fight a kickboxer, yeah. Luta Livre, again, I feel like it would just be a normal type grappling match. Maybe they would have decent control. Karate, I'd feel a little bit safer fighting a karate person than more traditional, and I mean modern. It's weird. I mean traditional in the sense like stuff that people traditionally use in MMA. Karate is just, I feel like they wouldn't be as prepared, and their stance is like a little bit weird, that side stance. I think I'd be less likely to get knocked out before grabbing someone than I would with these other stand-up martial arts. Lethwei, who knows, man. I don't know. Taekwondo, I feel like if someone tried to like do basic Taekwondo, I mean, if the kick didn't catch me and I could get close enough within close punching range, I think I would do fine. I mean, there's a new Taekwondo guy at my school, and he has no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience, so when we do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's just like I'm grappling a normal person. So I don't think Taekwondo, and he's got like, I don't know, 5 years of Taekwondo, but it doesn't really help you when the grappler turns it into a grappling match. Wing Chun, same thing, except I can get even closer without worrying about being knocked out. Capoeira, I mean, maybe I'll get caught by some magical thing, but I think I could just get close and grapple. Krav Maga, again, it's like, you can try and poke my eyes, that's fine. Being poked in the eyes isn't going to just end the fight, though. I mean, I'm going to keep going. I've been poked in the eyes before by accident. I've had teeth bite me, it happens, man, but you just keep going. I don't think adrenaline would stop you from like a minor injury like that. I mean, it would hurt like hell after, but I think I'd just keep going and probably do the same. Sumo, my God, I'm like 150 pounds, and imagining a 150 pound sumo wrestler is just too funny. And he would just run at me, giving me the grappling advantage. Aikido, yeah, it's not much they could do. Just don't grab my arm, and even if you do, I'll just ball my hand in a fist and pull it back. Kung Fu, I don't know. Tai Chi, it's not even a real martial art. And then these two would kick my ass because, again, it's like that combination of striking and grappling. Like, even if you can just defend grappling a little bit, but you know how to strike, like, it kind of nullifies Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to a certain extent. And other grappling, like, well, at least with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you don't have that option always of making it a grappling match. It's a little bit harder than if you're a wrestler. But, yeah, if someone just had a bit of like, oh, I know a little bit about wrestling and I know some good boxing, I think they'd beat a Jiu-Jitsu guy most of the time, unless the Jiu-Jitsu person can trip them or just get in quick enough. That's why MMA is just leagues above everything else, because you just take what works and you use it. But this is all the pure martial arts. This is my ranking. If you watched the video, let me know if you liked it. Subscribe if you want more stuff. Sometimes I do silly tier lists. Sometimes I'm gonna do a little bit more straightforward, serious stuff like this. So thank you for watching. So what I want to know from you guys is some of your experience. I mean, sure, I've been grappling for 2 years, and I've probably rolled well over 1,000 times by now, but I'd like to hear some of your experience, especially if you do other martial arts. I know some people are probably going to be upset for the ranking of their martial art, but this is honestly just my opinion from a good solid 4 years of following MMA and the UFC pretty closely, and also from just, actually living the martial arts lifestyle and grappling a bit and going against all types of people. So, again, just thank you for watching. I really want to hear what you guys think. I guess I'll see you in my next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That helps the channel and lets me know that people are interested in some of the stuff I'm doing. Alright, thanks again. Peace out. Bye-bye.